Have you ever thought about growing hops? In this video, we will discuss a few things to consider before breaking ground. Why have you decided to grow hops? Will you be growing them commercially or for yourself? Are you growing them for herbal uses? While all of these reasons are viable, we will focus on the commercial production of hops for the craft brewing market. Craft beer production and consumption has been on the rise for several years. From 2014 to 2015, there was a 13% increase in craft beer production. As you would expect, craft beer sales increased by 12.8%. Currently, craft beer makes up over 12% of the total beer market in the United States. Craft brewing in Pennsylvania is big business. In 2015, there were 178 craft breweries in Pennsylvania producing more than 4 million barrels of craft beer, which ranks highest in the United States. The craft brewing industry in Pennsylvania is a $4.48 billion industry, second only to California. Before you start growing hops, there are several different things you need to know. The first thing you need to find out is who will be buying your hops. Ask buyers how many pounds of hops are needed, what varieties they use, what form the hops should be in, and how much they will pay for the hops. There are dozens of varieties of hops available, but not all may be suited for your location or even available to you, as several varieties are proprietary. You will need to consider if you can meet their expectations before breaking ground. There are several different aspects of farming that will need to be considered before planting hops. This includes working capital, land, storage, equipment, and labor. The first thing that needs to be considered is working capital. Money will be needed to purchase or rent equipment for both installing the hopyard as well as maintaining the plants. You will need to purchase specialized infrastructure materials, including poles, wire, earth anchors, and other items. All hopyards must have an irrigation system installed as well. If you don't currently have a well or a good water source nearby, you will need to have a well dug, which can cost several $1,000s. Hops plants themselves can be expensive and may cost between $3 and $5 each. Rhizomes are also an option, which we will discuss later. Land is very important, as well as the size of the property you will be growing hops on. If you are looking to grow hops as a side business, you will need up to 4 acres of land. If you want to be a hop grower full-time, you will need at least 10 acres devoted to hops production. As of 2016, the largest grower in Pennsylvania had 4 acres of hops in production. The next thing to consider is storage. You will need to have somewhere to store your equipment, supplies, your harvested hops, and potentially a freezer to hold your hops. Much of this depends on the size of your operation as well as the type of equipment you will be using. Harvesters can be quite large, and an appropriate area to store them will be necessary. One of the most expensive parts of a hop growing operation is equipment. The most fundamental piece of equipment needed is a tractor. The ground will need to be worked, holes will need to be augered, and eventually you will need to harvest the large plants. You will need a wagon or cart to transport these plants, and the tractor is the most common implement used. Hop plants will need to be sprayed throughout the season with insecticides, fungicides, and other products to keep plants healthy. There are several different ways to accomplish this, including a tower sprayer or air blast sprayer, and each are typically pulled by a tractor. Once it is time to harvest the plants, you will need a quick but safe way to cut down the hop vines, and an aerial lift or tractor is the preferred method. Finally, removing the hop cones from the plants can take up to an hour per plant, but a mechanical harvester can drastically reduce the amount of time needed to accomplish this. Harvesters can cost upwards of $10,000, but will be well worth it if you have more than an acre of hops. Labor is perhaps the biggest variable among hops growers. While a large crew of workers is not needed daily, there are times throughout the season where specialized help will be necessary. At the time of planting, care must be taken to properly set plants to encourage root growth. This can take several days, depending on the size of your operation. Throughout the season, plants will need to be fertilized and sprayed. Once it is time to harvest the plants, several people will be needed to do so in a timely manner, especially if there is no mechanical harvester. If a farm has 1,000 plants on 1 acre, It could take up to 1,000 man-hours to harvest the cones, which may be very expensive if you are paying for labor. Mechanical harvesters can harvest up to 180 plants per hour, reducing the amount of man-hours needed significantly. After carefully considering everything we talked about up to this point, you must now look closer at the land you intend to use for production. The area where you will grow hops should receive full sun, have a flat or gentle slope, be well drained, and have good air circulation. If any of these factors are in question, you may have difficulty growing hops to their full potential. A soil sample should be taken to make sure the soil has the right properties to support hops. You should also perform a nematode assay to determine if nematodes are present in high numbers. If they are, you should consider a different location for growing hops. It is important to consider the crop's history of the proposed location. If row crops were used, determine what herbicides were used to control weeds. Certain herbicides can persist in the soil for several years and can inhibit or even kill newly planted hops. Finally, consider the amount of rocks present in the soil. Too many rocks will create major issues when trying to dig holes for poles to support the plants. You will need to dig to a depth of 3 to 4 feet, so checking this first will be crucial. Hop plants require regular irrigation throughout the season, about 1 inch of water per week. On 1 acre, this equates to about 6,000 gallons of water per day. A drip irrigation system will need to be installed, which will allow you to provide nutrients to the plants through fertigation as well. Hop plants can be purchased in 2 ways, as small plants or rhizomes. Small plants will establish quicker, but take longer to plant and be significantly more expensive. Depending on variety, you can expect to pay between $3 and $6 per plant, plus shipping charges. Rhizomes are cheaper and easier to plant, but take longer to establish. Whichever way you choose, be sure to purchase certified clean material so that you are not bringing viruses or diseases into your hop yard. Otherwise, you will fight these issues every year. Also be sure to plant the right varieties. Speak with your buyers and brewers to determine what types they want. Next, look to your local university for information on what varieties grow best in your climate. There are several varieties of hops that do not grow as well in the northeastern United States as they do out west, and vice versa. Choose varieties that will be easier to grow, resist disease and insect pressure, and that your buyers will pay for. Once the hops are harvested, they need to be dried down to 8 to 12% moisture. In order to accomplish this, an oast will be needed. There are several different ways to build an oast, which can range in cost. For smaller operations, an oast can be built for less than $1,000. Depending on how your buyers want the finished hops, it may be necessary to have the hops pelletized. Pelletizing equipment can be quite expensive, so you should determine if this is necessary or if your buyers can use whole hops. You may be able to find a local hops grower that has pelletizing equipment available at a fee. If you decide to purchase your own pelletizing equipment, you will likely need a hammer mill, a pelletizer, and a vacuum sealing unit for packaging the finished hops. Hop poles, depending on type of wood and shipping, can cost up to $50 per pole. Anchors are needed to hold the poles in place and can cost about $750 per acre. Add your wire and miscellaneous supplies, and you have the infrastructure of the hop yard costing over $8,000. Your plants will cost around $4,000, and your irrigation system will add another $1,500. Altogether, a 1-acre hop yard will cost well over $13,000, not including labor. Given the fact that hops are a perennial, most of these costs are a one-time expense and can be recouped over the life of the hop yard. There are a few other costs that need to be considered. As mentioned before, a well may be necessary if one is not present already. A harvester is a great implement to have that will save on labor in the long run, but can cost between $10,000 and $30,000. A sprayer will be needed, which can cost up to $10,000. You can build an oast to dry your hops for less than $1,000 or purchase one for several $1,000s. Finally, pelletizing equipment or a pelletizing fee at another location will need to be considered if your buyers require pelletized hops. You are probably wondering what hops are worth at this point. You can see that starting a commercial hop yard can be quite expensive. The prices of finished hops vary significantly across the country. Much of the pricing depends on variety, quantity, and quality of the hops. You can expect between $10 and $18 per pound of dried, pelletized, and vacuum-sealed hops. Whole cone hops, dried or wet hops, typically sell for about $5 to $14 per pound. Speak with your buyers to determine what they are willing to pay for your hops and then decide if the investment will work for you. Hops take several years to reach maturity and will not produce many hops in the first 2 years. A hop grower should expect little to no hop harvest in the first year, about a 50% harvest in the second year, and between 75% and 100% harvest in the third year. By the fourth year, a full harvest can be expected. At 100% harvest, expect between 1 and 2 pounds of dried hops per plant. This can vary significantly by variety, with some producing as little as a half of a pound per plant up to potentially 3 or 4 pounds. Under a perfect scenario at full harvest, we can look closer at what is possible on a 1-acre hopyard. Assuming you have 1,000 plants per acre and you are harvesting 1.5 pounds of dry hops per plant, this will result in 1,500 pounds of dry hops. Assuming you have pelletizing equipment and are able to get $15 per pound for your hops, this would result in gross sales of $22,500 per year per acre of hops. This number can be very enticing, but it is important to remember that this is a perfect scenario. There are many factors that can affect your harvest, including weather, varieties, pest pressure, and fertilization. All of your input costs will need to be subtracted, which may include machinery, labor, fertilizer, irrigation, pelletizing, and packaging costs. These could easily exceed $15,000 per acre. Hops can be a fun and rewarding crop to grow, but are not suited for all growers in all locations. Make sure you understand what is needed to grow hops successfully, and you will be rewarded with plentiful harvest for years to come. For more information, contact your local extension office or visit us on the web at extension.psu.edu. Thanks for watching.